Hey everybody, welcome to Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page. On this episode, her father, Mike Mills, was the first 3-time grand champion at the Memphis in May barbecue competition, the so-called Super Bowl of swine, and she's honoring his memory, turning out barbecue he'd be proud of and growing the iconic business he started. Here's Amy Mills. Amy, thank you for joining me. How are you today?
I am doing great. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Here being where?
Well, here I am with you virtually, but I am in Murphysboro, Illinois. I am sitting in our room called the Warehouse, and this is an event facility that's part of our campus here.
Your campus being, started out as a small barbecue joint, right? 17th Street Barbecue.
Exactly. And now we have 7 businesses on 2 blocks.
Wow. You know, most people would not consider Southern Illinois a barbecue center. How did that happen? Is there a barbecue tradition there, or did your dad just kind of invent it?
There's very much a barbecue tradition here, but I think that my dad absolutely popularized it and made it well known. We are actually the official barbecue capital of Illinois, which is the only thing our state legislature has been unanimous about in I don't know how many years, in large part due to 17th Street and Mike Mills and the legend that he created, but also because we have had a long history and tradition of barbecue here since 1916. And I actually worked with a historian in town named Mike Jones, who has sadly passed away. But he really combed through microfiche and found all kinds of restaurants that have been here over the years. None, of course, with the length of time as 17th Street, which is celebrating its 40th year in July.
Wow. What kind of barbecue tradition? I mean, you say Central Texas, you're talking about brisket. You say Memphis, I know what kind of flavors you're talking. What was the tradition?
I think that barbecue came up through Illinois. We don't know this for a fact, but it just stands to reason that from the Great Migration after slavery, people left the South, traveled straight up to Chicago. The people dropped off along the way and created barbecue in this region. There's Cairo, Illinois, which is about an hour from us. It's famous for barbecue, a very tangy orange barbecue sauce that they have there. Our barbecue probably is most similar to Memphis in that we do depend heavily upon a dry rub. We do have dry ribs that we serve, but I think that what is distinctly Southern Illinois is our very savory flavors. It is not a sweet barbecue, very complex, nuanced, layered flavors of spice.
And is it pork?
It's pork. We also do brisket, but I think another huge differentiator is our wood. So my dad really popularized cooking with apple wood. Most people on the circuit way back when were using hickory and oak and other woods. So he used apple wood because we are surrounded here by apple and peach orchards. Our nickname of our town is Apple City, thus the name of his barbecue team, Apple City Barbecue. And so we smoke with those apple and wild cherry woods. And as you know, wood is an ingredient and gives a distinct flavor to barbecue. And so I think that is very much a differentiator and a hallmark of Southern Illinois barbecue.
Let's talk about your dad and the history of 17th Street. And your father sadly passed away a few years back, but he was a legend.
The legend, yes.
Explain. When I met him, I was at Memphis in May writing about it for my book, Food Americana, and I stumbled into 17th Street's tent. And there was some guy in jeans standing by himself by a table, and I figured I'd say hi, and I talked to him, and he was delightful and pleasant, and never once said to me, I'm a legend. And I got back to my hotel room, and I went on the internet because his name was familiar, and I realized this is the only guy to win Memphis in May 3 times. So I went back and apologized and said, I kind of feel like the sports writer who didn't know he was talking to Babe Ruth. But your dad was just so modest and so lovely. And he started 17th Street out of a bar?
Yes. It was really a perfect storm. A lot of different things happened. Our town, very rural Southern Illinois, rural America, in the 80s went through something that many small towns have gone through. There was a shopping mall was built in another town. A Walmart was built right here. So a lot of the mom and pop stores were shriveling up and dying, and the landscape changed dramatically. And he knew that it was very important to have some event or something happening in our town that would be an economic driver. And he and a group of friends decided to start a barbecue contest. And this was obviously 1987. Things are very up and coming then, not at all like they are today. But he knew that that would bring other people's dollars into our town, and they would stay in a hotel, they would buy a tank of gas, they would go to the grocery store and do all of those things. So he started this contest, and very quickly they figured out if they wanted to get people to come to our contest, they would have to go out on the circuit, so they would meet teams. Remember, at this time, there is no way to know when these barbecue contests are. You have to get on a mailing list. There's no internet. There's no email newsletter or anything like that. So they went out and started competing, and very quickly started winning and winning big. And on their fifth try, their fifth contest, they won grand champion, and that won them an entry into Memphis in May. And they were very nervous about that because, here they are with 275 teams who are very experienced. But they thought if we could just get into the top 75, that would not be too embarrassing. So they went, and at Memphis in May, you cook only in one category. So they cooked in the ribs category. And there, at that time, there were no water hoses. You had to carry 5-gallon buckets to a water source and get your water and walk it back to your campsite. And he sat down on a log just to have a rest for a moment. And a gentleman came and sat down next to him. And that person was Joe Phelps, who was the publisher of the National Barbecue News. And that was a newspaper that would let you know where barbecue contests were. So it was really the only way to figure out where you could go and start and compete. And Joe listened to my dad's story, and he said, well, you're probably not going to do very well. And he handed him this silver coin that had been made out of silver that they would mine from the negatives for the newspaper. They would strip the silver and then make these commemorative coins and give them out to people. And he said, I want you to go home empty-handed, so I'm going to give you this coin. Well, they won not only first place ribs, but they won grand champion overall. So that's the overall winner of whole hog, shoulder, and ribs. And they got the first perfect score ever awarded at Memphis in May. My dad took that coin home and had it mounted in gold and wore it every single day for the rest of his life. And the funniest part about that, or one of many funny parts, is that the headline of the Memphis Commercial Appeal the next day said, "What's the world coming to when a bunch of Yankees beat you at your own game in your own backyard?" So even though we were only 3 hours from Memphis, obviously very much above the Mason-Dixon line.
Now, the team was what, Big Apple Barbecue?
Apple City Barbecue.
Sorry, the team was Apple City Barbecue.
Yes.
And they won champion like 3 more times?
So they won in ribs 4 times, and they won world grand champion overall 3 times. And that was a record they held for 13 years until Myron Mixon tied their record. And then since then, Myron Mixon and Chris Lilly have both exceeded that record. But it's important to note that my dad stopped competing after that 4th win because as he said, I have to get back to work. I don't know where I got all the money to be out here playing around in this hobby anyway. But he did have to get back to work. And not only did he have this bar where we sold the barbecue, he was also a dental technician by trade. So he worked all day at his dental lab and then worked at night at his bar.
Why did he start selling barbecue at the bar, and when?
Okay, well, so going back to the 1930s, my grandparents had a barbecue sauce for which they were widely known in their neighborhood and town. And they were from Southeast Missouri and then moved to Cape Girardeau, Missouri when my dad was born in Cape Girardeau, which is about an hour from here. And then they moved to Murphysboro after that. But my grandfather was a traveling salesman, and he sold soap suds and cigarettes for the Palmolive Peat Company. But he barbecued at night and on the weekends. He made that barbecue sauce, sold it to family and friends. When he was firing up his pit, all the neighbors would come over and bring meat for him to barbecue. And his dream was that he would quit his job and have some sort of barbecue business. He really wanted to sell that barbecue sauce. However, he died when my dad was 7. So that dream never came to fruition. My grandmother had 5 children. She was left with 3 children still at home. She continued to sell the barbecue sauce, make it at home, and sell it in sterilized mayonnaise jars and ketchup jars to family and friends. She did a lot of other things too to make a living. But my dad, in high school, he built barbecue pits out of 55-gallon barrels and sold them. He barbecued for free. If anybody who would provide meat, he barbecued for class reunions and catered parties. And it was always just a passion and a hobby.
And we'll be right back.
In the mid 70s, my dad bought a little bar, I don't know, a couple of blocks from here. And he would, on the weekends, would have fish fries and barbecues, and he would give the food away or charge $1 a plate just to get people to come in and buy more alcohol. So barbecue is just this constant theme and thread. He sold that bar and bought a different one called, at that time, it was called Allen Ray's. And we are actually the fourth owners of that establishment. But for 100 years, there has been a barbecue sandwich and a hamburger sold in this building. But no women or children would come in. It was just a bar. There's a drive-through. You pull up, ring a residential doorbell, and you could take home hamburgers and barbecue. Our drive-through still operates like that today. It's just a residential doorbell. There's no menu. There's no intercom. There's no buzzer or let people know we're driving up. You just have to ring the bell. So really, it's very much locals who know what they want because there's no menu posted. My dad bought that and then made that into a restaurant.
17th Street.
17th Street, exactly. Initially called 17th Street Bar and Grill, and then obviously quickly changing to 17th Street Barbecue, since that's what we were selling and that's what we became really famous for.
So you grew up surrounded by barbecue.
I did.
Did you like it?
I loved it, but I also ran fast and furious and far away from it. So I went away to journalism school at Mizzou. I moved very briefly to Dallas and then to Boston. But while in Boston, I came back around to barbecue. So I started doing all of the marketing and public relations for 17th Street while living there. So as long as you have a phone and a computer and UPS overnight shipping, you can work from pretty much anywhere and do marketing.
When did you move back?
So I moved back as my children grew older and then went away to school. I came back more and more. But more importantly, I would be flying in wherever we were going. So we would be in New York at the Big Apple Barbecue Block Party or helping open Blue Smoke, Memphis in May, all the traveling that we did everywhere. I would just fly into those places. But as my children got older, I could be here for longer stretches of time. Then at the end of 2016, my dad had a stroke. And so I came back full time very immediately. I had actually been in New York finishing our second book, and I just pretty much had to drop everything and come back.
So sorry.
Thank you.
You then got to work side by side with your dad?
I did. Well, I was always working side by side with him. So I think that I know that my dad would very much tell you that I was the gas, he was the brakes, but he very much would give me credit for a lot of the things that happened. He did the things and I told the world about them. So I felt very fortunate that I did have extra time with him, and that after his health failed, that I really had some good, solid time with him as well.
From being around barbecue made by your father for so long, did you know how to make it?
Oh, yes.
When did you start to develop that skill?
I have always been a home cook. Weirdly, I never worked in the restaurants because I was away for so long. I wasn't here working, but I was involved in testing and things like that. I wrote all of our cookbooks, but I really had to learn to make the barbecue. I would say around 2007, 2008, I had to help make it at the Big Apple Barbecue Block Party and all of those places. And then we started a program called On Cue, where we taught other people about the business of barbecue, and that had a cooking component to it as well. So, I had to always be able to jump in if I had to, even though obviously most of my work was marketing and then now operations.
This is going to sound like a ridiculously simple question, but how do you make the famous 17th Street barbecue?
Well, all barbecue really has the same components. It's some blend of spices, it's some sort of sauce, it's whatever your wood is, and then, of course, the meat itself. In our world, I think we're a little bit different in that we take low and slow very literally. So we cook at 210 degrees for most things except chicken for a much longer period of time, where other people might be at 225, 250, 275. We're definitely very low and slow.
And a 25-degree difference, is that important?
I think it is. I mean, that a 25-degree difference could be an hour or 2 hours in the course of cooking meat.
Well, how long do you cook for?
Ribs, for example, could be 5 or 6 hours. And some people can do ribs in 3 or 4 hours. But our ribs do not shrink away from the bone. So, you see like beauty shots of ribs and there are little edges of the rib bone sticking out. And some people carve it out to show even more. We take pride in the fact that our meat is totally covering the bone. The higher the heat, the more your meat will shrink. So ours does not shrink quite as much.
There's this belief on the part of many people that ribs should fall off the bone. In fact, they should not, should they?
No, they should not. They should not.
How do you know when they're right?
Well, you can pick them up, and my dad would say, pick up the end of a rack, and if it bends like a swayback horse, it's done. If it's straight like a board, it's not done yet. If it breaks in half, you better get them off quickly because they're verging on getting overdone.
And you dry rub them before you cook them?
We do. We dry rub our ribs. And again, a different technique. We use a fairly light coat, but we're putting that on 3 times during the cooking process.
Why?
So we're really building up the flavor. Part of it is economics. I watch people just use so much rub and it's so wasteful. Half of it's falling down in the box or in the Lexan pan or wherever it is that you're dusting. Sometimes, depending on the grind of your rub, it can feel gritty in your mouth. We want that to just melt and form a bark. You don't really even know that it's rubbed.
And then is there a sauce with the ribs or is it just the dry rub?
At the very end of the cooking process, maybe 30 minutes before they're going to come off the pit, we put a thin layer of sauce, very thin, and we add another layer of magic dust, and it goes around in the rotisserie. So by the time it comes back around to you, it's dry. Then we do it again, another thin layer of sauce, another thin layer of magic dust. It goes around again, and then they come off the pit. So they're pretty dry when they come off. You can swizzle more sauce on them if you want, but they're going to be really delicious just as they are because that sauce and rub have created a bark.
Well, what are the flavor components? I mean, you want to give me the secret to your rub?
Well, I can't give you all the secrets. I don't think that it's terribly different than anybody else's rub. Obviously, paprika is the carrier, and there's sugar and salt, and then all of your other barbecue flavors. It's obviously just the amounts and combinations. But it's definitely a savory flavor. It is not a sweet flavor, even though there is some sugar in it.
And the sauce, is it your grandmother's recipe? Or I guess originally your grandfather's?
Yes. It was modified during the competition cooking stage, but not too much. It's pretty close to the original.
Is it tangy? Can you compare it to sauce I would get in a different region?
I am going to call it savory. I don't think it's too tangy, but what I love about our sauce is that it's really a nod to all of the barbecue regions. There's a lot of vinegar. There's a lot of ketchup. It's ketchup based. There's a lot of mustard, and then obviously all of the spices. So you're really tasting a lot of different flavors. It's not that one note sweet sauce that you get from a typical commodity sauce. It's not like that at all. It's definitely an unusual sauce.
Coming right back. Ribs are clearly the signature item, but what else can I get at your place?
Oh, you can get all kinds of things. Another signature that a lot of restaurants do not have on their menu is a pork steak. So that is a steak that is cut from the butt end of a pork shoulder. They're frozen and we cut them on a bandsaw. We season them with magic dust and smoke them. And then we cool them down and then we caramelize them to order. So it's sort of like a reverse sear steak, but it's a pork steak. We caramelize them with the barbecue sauce and they are so delicious.
But that almost gets to the definition of what's barbecue. How can a steak be barbecue?
I'm not necessarily calling that barbecue, but I think my dad would tell you that obviously barbecue is smoked meat. And I think now we're not so hooked on it must be smoked and it must be indirect. I mean, people call grilling barbecue also. But I think that once you've taken that smoked meat and you've added sauce and you've added spice in a dry rub along with some sauce, along with that smoked meat, and obviously smoke is the important component, then you have barbecue. I also think, though, that barbecue can come not necessarily from smoke because it's also a heat source and that people like the Rendezvous is grilling over charcoal, and that is very much barbecue.
In what used to be a coal chute. For their ribs.
Right.
And it's high heat and it's fast and they're terrific.
Exactly.
And by the way, for anyone the 2 people who don't know, it's the Rendezvous in Memphis.
Yes. The Rendezvous. Everyone will know. I think that we've all become more ecumenical in what we like. And I also think if you are passionate about barbecue, there's no one best barbecue. Obviously, I'm very partial to our barbecue, but I enjoy barbecue everywhere. And I love to taste different flavors and different combinations. And it's really one of the few cuisines where just with some different spices, sauces, and wood, you can create so many different flavors. And so many are so delicious.
You do brisket, for example, correct? Which
Yes.
for years was Central Texas and Central Texas only.
But you say for years, and we've had brisket on our menu since the early 90s.
I stand corrected. And why did you put brisket on the menu?
Well, because my dad liked brisket. Everything on our menu is because my dad liked it.
That's a good reason.
Exactly. I don't really know why he did that, but we have chicken on there too. I'm sure it was just to provide options, all the options.
Well, I used to be excited if I was going to a different part of the country at this being a rare opportunity for me to taste that style of barbecue. Now you can kind of get any style anywhere. Is that good? Is it bad?
I don't think it's either. I think barbecue has become very much a hybrid. The only thing I think is a little odd is when people say, I'm a Texas barbecue joint in Ohio. Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Why don't you just want to be a barbecue joint and you serve this fabulous brisket? I don't know. But again, I've had such good barbecue in so many places. And I think what makes it special, again, is just it's that person's take on it. It's that person's smoke, spice, and seasoning, and even just the care they take with it. You can have technically all of the things working in your favor, but I really feel like it's heart and soul. You can taste the love in food, and especially you can taste it in barbecue.
Barbecue, as you mentioned a moment ago, it's gone in a number of directions. There's been an upscaling, I think. Barbecue at one point was tough, cheap meat saved by being cooked low and slow. Now you got like Franklin's Barbecue in Austin introduced the use of prime beef. How do you feel about that?
I mean, barbecue is just not cheap anymore at all. Proteins are very expensive, and we're very protein heavy, obviously, in this world. I think it's one of the most expensive restaurants you can run because you just can't make that much money off of side. You couldn't just be a sides only place.
You're not making a ton off salad.
No, you are not. So it just is what it is. I think we went through a little period, the prime barbecue is one thing. There were people trying to use, heritage cuts of meat. We have tasted and tested so many different things. Sometimes you can tell the difference in some beef. Sometimes you can't. I would argue that you really can't tell a difference in a pork butt, if it's a heritage pork butt or if it's just a commodity. And when I say the word commodity, that sounds like a dirty word. And I don't think it is. That's what we serve here. We're not in a city. We don't have people who would pay the extra $2 or $3 per item that would cost to have different kinds of meat. We do use certified Angus beef, and I would stack our beef up against anyone.
Is the grade choice?
No, it's prime.
Oh, and here I'm beating up Franklin's Barbecue for doing what you're doing.
We go back and forth. I mean, sometimes it's whatever is least expensive too. We do not always stick with one thing. We'll stick with one genre. We'll always have certified Angus beef, but we will not always stick with one thing. But I don't think it's bad. And I think as the awareness of barbecue has grown and risen, and the sophistication of the people who are enjoying it has grown and risen, people expect different things.
Price point at some point has got to be a problem, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
Are you worried about prices at this point?
We worry about prices all the time. When we reopened after COVID, beef was so expensive that we did not bring brisket back. We just didn't think people would pay for it because it was going to have to be $22 a pound. And people asked and asked and asked, and we finally brought it back, and they will pay. And now it's even more than that. When we are out doing different vending events and we will charge, $3 more to have brisket nachos versus pork nachos, we will sell out a brisket all day long. I think people want what they want, and they're willing to pay for those things. They're willing to pay for 17th Street. We are enjoying the fruits of our labors and of our long legacy and reputation. Again, I think, barbecue is just no longer a bargain food.
But it's damn good.
It sure is.
Obviously, your father was a major player on the competition circuit. How do you feel about the circuit these days?
In what sense?
Is it only for privileged folks? It's an expensive hobby. And there's been an argument that in some respects it has skewed against the African American population, which has had a harder time, it seems, getting sponsorships. Has it become too much of an elite game?
I do not think so. Although I see how you could argue that. I see that side of things, but I will tell you why. I think there are people who run the circuit who do get sponsors. Although I will tell you, most sponsorships mean this person is going to give you some rub and sauce, and this person is going to give you a cooler
or a hat.
There's very little money being changed hands unless you are getting a sponsorship that includes you're going to cater for this company, or there's just not, somebody might be lucking out and getting more than somebody else, but I think you would be surprised by what those sponsorships really mean. And of course, it's nice if somebody is giving you all your charcoal is paid for, all your rubs and sauces are paid for, but ultimately you still have to buy the meat. And again, on this competition circuit, you're buying Snake River Farms, briskets, there's certain things that are going to help you do better. The first Memphis in May that my dad won, he won with a homemade pit, a 55-gallon barrel that he made himself. The other times he won was with a propane tank rotisserie that he and his friend made themselves. So never was there a fancy smoker, ever. So we are in the 38th year this year of our barbecue contest. It's called Praise the Lord Murphysboro Barbecue Contest. And last year we had a record 119 teams. We had to actually turn 15 teams away. Never have we had that.
Wow.
So I do worry at times, are there enough new people coming into the sport? People leave and you have to be attracting new people. And competition barbecue is a lifestyle. It takes up your whole weekend. If you have children in sports, you are not out on the barbecue circuit. But there seem to be plenty of people. And I will tell you that we have several Black teams who place and who love collecting those apple glass trophies that we're known for here. So it is expensive. I think one barrier to entry is the steak competition circuit. I don't know if you're very familiar with that.
No.
But that to me is like a very fast growing sport. It's a steak contest. You pay $150. They give you 2 prime ribeyes. You go through a lottery process with ping pong balls to choose your meat. So you come in, all the steaks are laid out on a table. You get in line based on your little ball that you've drawn, and you pick one steak, and then you go back through and pick another one. You bring back one steak 2 hours later, cooked medium, and it's judged. Some people are actually cooking those over charcoal chimneys. Most of them are cooking it over a Weber or a PK grill. And then you can pack up and go home. You don't have all of those different meats to cook and all the different things. So our contest is actually the only tri-sanctioned contest in the country. We have a KCBS component, an MBN component, and a state contest.
Okay, KCBS is Kansas City
Barbecue Society. So you're cooking brisket, pork, ribs, and chicken. Then you have Memphis Barbecue Network. So you're cooking whole hog, ribs, shoulder. The thing about MBN is that you could cook just one category. So we will have teams who come and cook only ribs. And you could still win the whole thing cooking just one category. For KCBS, you must enter all categories.
And you have the steak contest as well.
Yes. And so people double dip. Like 20 or 30 teams will cook steaks as well as their barbecue component. And we usually have 9 or 10 teams who will cook in both barbecue contests. And the turn-in times are staggered. So if you're cooking your MBN ribs and your KCBS ribs, you have time to prepare both boxes and turn them in right away. So it's a harder contest to cook because you're off your timeline of your normal cook, because we've timed it so you could turn in some different categories.
You are now a barbecue consultant. Apparently that's a pretty substantial business for you. What does a barbecue consultant do?
Well, there are a lot of people who want to start barbecue restaurants and want consulting in some form of the barbecue world. What it mostly entails, and what I really try to push people toward, is the seminars we offer. So we offer the only professional level barbecue classes in the world. And we have had, since 2009, over 1,400 people from 16 countries and 45 states who have come to our classes in very small groups. I like to keep them to 20 people. We spend 2 days talking about the business of barbecue. So we talk about marketing, PR, operations, how to read your P&L, what type of percentages you should be thinking about, what should your food cost be versus your labor cost, etc. We have a whole different class that you can come to about catering. So not only the mechanics of catering, but the sales aspect of catering as well. We talk a little bit about food trucks and sort of mobile businesses. And we intersperse those classroom tactics with actually cooking barbecue the way we cook here. And we're very careful to tell people people, this is just what works for us. You will go away and do your own thing, but we produce a high volume of barbecue day in, day out, and this is how we do it. So we cook ribs, chicken, pork, and brisket while they're here, and they get to see all of those things from prep to coming off the pit, and then how we hold it. And holding is the most important part. How we hold and how we retherm meat.
Explain that.
Everyone can make something that tastes great coming right off the pit, but it's got to taste great all day. And for that last person who walks in that night, the food still has to taste really good.
It's not like in an upscale restaurant where you order a chicken dish and the chef puts it on.
Right.
In this case, you've cooked a whole bunch of stuff overnight, perhaps, or whatever your timeline, and then you hold. So what's the secret to holding?
You have to come to my class to figure that out.
Oh, come on. Give me a hint.
Well, air is the enemy. So how you're holding it, and the time, the temperature.
Butcher paper or foil?
Never foil. Foil creates air pockets. So butcher paper for brisket, for sure, we use that. But I will tell you, we didn't always use that. We do use that now, but we learn all the time techniques and new ways of doing things. And if we see something that looks interesting, we will totally try it. Because if it helps improve things, we want to be right on the cutting edge of that too. We hold ribs, for example, when they come off the pit, they go into a cooler and they go to our restaurant. We work out of that cooler until the ribs aren't hot enough anymore. Then they are wrapped in food safe film and they go into a warming cabinet.
Honestly, if I show up at the end of the day, can I tell a difference?
There's going to be somebody who tells you that they can, but we can do all the perfect things, but it's really down to that person in the kitchen and how much care they're taking.
How do you train people? There's culinary school if I want to be a white tablecloth chef. Where do you get folks and how do they learn?
We are so fortunate here. So we have a quarter of the people who work here have been here from 12 to 26 years, which is very unheard of in the restaurant industry. So the person in charge of the kitchen that produces all that meat works side by side with my dad for years. So many people learned directly from him. And now those are the people teaching the next wave of people.
So if I get hired to work to make barbecue at your place, will I have to have had cooking experience?
Well, you're probably not going to go right into barbecue. You're probably going to be making mac and cheese first.
And how is your mac and cheese?
I think it's pretty darn good. Good side can elevate bad barbecue, but bad sides can ruin good barbecue.
I haven't heard that said before, but that's a very good point.
Well, that's a Mike Millsism.
What are your other sides?
We are probably most famous for baked beans, like a tangy pit bean. It has 5 different kinds of beans, so there are lots of different textures in it. And it's sweet, but it's also very tangy. Ketchup, mustard, green peppers, onions, a lot of different spices, and then all of those different beans. You
and your dad wrote what is considered kind of a Bible in the barbecue world, Peace, Love, and Barbecue. Why'd you write it? And were you surprised that it became this mega hit?
We wrote Peace, Love, and Barbecue, and I actually had the idea for that book when I came back into working in the barbecue world with my dad. So, I went far away, and I thought all these people are weird. Like I'm not going to be in this barbecue world. And then when I came back into this world, I was like, all those people I thought were so strange are actually kind of cool people. And there is no book that really talks about the culture of barbecue. Now, at this time, there is Stephen Reichlin's Barbecue Bible. There is Cheryl Jameson's Spice and Smoke. And there is Smokestack Lightning, which is a little bit more anthropological by Lolis Eli and Frank. Oh my gosh, Frank, what's his last name? That's it. There are really no barbecue books.
Now, what year was this?
This is 2000. And our book was published in 2005. So I thought I need to write a book about all these people because this is just this unique subculture of America that really nobody knows about. You have to be in this world. And so I wrote a book proposal and I queried some New York agents, and I was at the Aspen Wine and Food Festival. We were cooking there with Danny Meyer just prior to the opening of Blue Smoke,
which was Danny Meyer's barbecue restaurant in New York. Your father
was a partner. And I met a writer there and I was telling her what I was working on. And she said, before you sign with any agent, I would love for you to meet my agent. And I ended up signing with that girl's agent. She was from Memphis. She totally got barbecue. She was really wonderful. And so she signed on to be the agent and then, sold the book, The book actually was preemptively purchased before it went to auction. It was all very exciting. And then it was also nominated for a James Beard Award, which was just a huge thrill.
And explain, was it a cookbook? Was it a history? What did you cover?
Peace, Love, and Barbecue, I think, is very unique in that it is the story of 58 of our best barbecue friends interspersed with recipes. So I called it an Under the Tuscan Sun, which is Frances May's famous book about Italy, but about barbecue. So these recipes were interspersed with the stories. And I think most people would say the stories are more important than the recipes, although the recipes are all, tested recipes and all very good. And people started using that book like a yearbook. People would take it and have people sign the book. I had an attorney from Chicago who would call me every time he went on a business trip, and he would say, I'm going to this town. Could you let that person know? I would love to meet them and have my book signed. And I think he probably collected more signatures than anyone in his Peace, Love, and Barbecue book. So it just became very special. And I feel that it's a book that has really stood the test of time. It's actually having its 20th birthday right now. I should be celebrating that.
Well, happy birthday to the book.
Happy birthday to Peace, Love, and Barbecue. It's definitely an evergreen book. It's always still in the top barbecue book list.
And you followed it up with another book, right?
We did. So I really put heart and soul into that book. I just felt like I gave it everything. And so right away, they're like, what's your next book going to be? And I just didn't know. I just, wasn't going to have, here's my book about rubs, here's my book about sauces. I just felt like I gave it all the first time. But as time went on and so many things happened in the barbecue world, I did have an idea for Praise the Lord. And that book really became my dad's and my parallel journeys in barbecue. So all of the chapter openers are written from different perspectives, and it's peppered with great stories throughout about things that happened from 2000 till 2017 when that book was published. But it's a little bit more of a straightforward book. So the first book was not like, here's your chapter on hors d'oeuvres and here's your chapter on meat. Everything was just willy-nilly in the book, and it depended on the story of the person about whom that recipe was about. This book is a little bit more straightforward, but what I'm really proud of in this book is the chapter on meat. So many books will say, smoke this pork butt at 250 until it's done. But I really went through and talked about how do you make sure that you are maintaining the fire, and how are you temping and at what time, and how long do you think it will be, and what should you look at certain times. So it's pretty thorough.
What do you see in the future for barbecue in general and for 17th Street?
I think barbecue will always have a trend. And so you were kind of identifying an upscale trend. I think now there is an ethnic trend. And by ethnic, I'm going to say like Southeast Asian flavors, Korean flavor, like other flavors that are paired with barbecue. I have a great friend in St. Louis, Gerard Kraft, who just opened a restaurant called Expat. And his barbecue spices are all just really big pungent flavors of rubs. Again, though, very much the technique of cooking barbecue that anybody would be using. But it's all about those flavors that come from all over the world. So I think that is a trend. I think that barbecue has now really cemented itself in its birthright place. It is an American food group. It's the original American cuisine. I think it will always have some sort of enduring popularity. There was definitely a spike of popularity, and I always credit Danny Meyer and Blue Smoke and Union Square Hospitality for that, because for all of the years that we were in New York doing the Big Apple Barbecue Block Party, we had this stage in New York City where all of the media could come and visit with us, tell our stories. We all benefited greatly from sharing what we did from all over the country. Nobody was coming to all of these little towns and writing about these people and these personalities. And so, of course, that gave us a voice, and people were very intensely interested in barbecue. But I think that interest has endured. And it's as much about the people and the personalities as it is about the food, which I think is very interesting. Most food is not like that.
You're making sauce at scale. I mean, you have a factory.
Mm-hmm.
Any other ventures coming? And you have a second location. Any other ventures coming up?
Right now, we renovated this building where we have the factory at 17th Street. So we're making our sauce and we're co-packing for other people. So that has been a big adventure, and it's taken way longer to get going than I ever dreamed or anticipated, but it really is all coming to fruition, and that's exciting. The front part of that building, it was the oldest car dealership in our town. So the part that would have been the car showroom is a coffee shop. It's coffee, breakfast, lunch, brunch, gourmet groceries, and it's called Faye. That is named after my grandmother and my daughter, and it's really a nod to the feminine side of our business. So that's just a daytime, it closes at 2 o'clock every day, but open daily. When I moved back here, I jokingly said I have got to have a decent cup of coffee because we just didn't have a coffee culture in our area. And so I'm really proud of what we're doing there. We have this building in which I'm sitting right now. This is 2 event rooms, a catering kitchen. We run our concession business out of this. And then upstairs, we have a mail order business.
Wow. You're killing it.
So we have a lot. On any given day, something is going awry. So I wouldn't say killing it necessarily, but we're working really hard at it.
Amy, it's been just a pleasure to take some time to chat with you. Thank you for doing this.
It is my pleasure. I've enjoyed seeing your face.
We've kind of talked at each other for a number of years, but finally we got the video call. It's a pleasure for me too. And as I said, it was just, your father just so impressed me.
Well, he was one of a kind for sure, and his legacy lives on every single day. Our main goal is to do what he taught us, make him really proud, not changing a thing, because why would you? If it's not broke, don't fix it. And so I know he would be so proud of the way that we've continued to operate. He did die kind of during COVID, not from COVID, but what has happened since COVID has been incredibly challenging. And I know that he would be really proud of the way that we have rolled with the punches and come out of all of this.
Amy, thanks again.
Thank you.
Amy Mills on Culinary Characters Unlocked. I'm David Page, and I'll see you next time.